Hey guys, welcome to the channel, where the Bible's most powerful stories are brought to life. And if you've been around, you know that we love digging into the Old Testament, the Torah, the prophets, Psalms, and sometimes even those really weird genealogical lists. But today, we're going to cover one of the most significant moments in Israeli history, one that splits the nation of Israel in two separate kingdoms and changes the course of the nation forever. This is the story of Rehoboam, the king who refused to listen and lost a kingdom because of it. When Solomon, the third king of Israel, passed away, he left behind a huge legacy. He built the first temple in Jerusalem, which was meant to be the dwelling place of God. Under his rule, the kingdom reached its largest size, stretching from Mount Lebanon in the north to the border of Egypt in the south. And during his reign, the treasury overflowed with gold and silver. So when Solomon's son Rehoboam came to power, he inherited the greatest kingdom Israel had ever known. But with this greatness came a huge problem. During Solomon's reign, he put heavy taxes and forced labor on his people to build projects like the temple and his famous palace complex. But now his son Rehoboam had to figure out how to keep such a vast empire together. And apparently, the people didn't think he was up to the task. A few months after taking the throne, representatives from all over Israel met up with Rehoboam in Shechem, an area in Samaria, which was at the time the spiritual center of Israel. They went there because this is where Joseph's bones were buried and where the book of Deuteronomy says that the future of Israel would be decided. Now, they weren't meeting there to declare independence or anything like that. They simply wanted to talk to the new king and tell him how hard it was for them to pay all of those taxes and work so hard for his father, Solomon. They asked him to ease up a bit. Basically, they were saying, hey, we know your dad worked us really hard. Can you give us a break? But we do and know exactly what the people said because the only record we have of this event is in the Bible. So we can only read between the lines and see how Rehoboam reacted. And his reaction was terrible. Before giving them an answer, Rehoboam took 3 days to think about what he should say. And during this time, he talked to two different groups of advisors. The first group was older men who had served under his father and had experience working with the people. They told him, don't be stubborn. The people are already exhausted from working for your father. If you lighten their workload, they'll love you and serve you forever. The second group he talked to was his peers, the princes and nobles who had grown up with him. And they told him to do the exact opposite. Don't be a wimp. Your father worked them hard, and so will you. He used whips, but you'll use scorpions. Rehoboam was young and kind of hot-headed. He didn't know what to do, so he chose to follow the advice of his friends rather than the older, wiser men. So when the leaders of Israel came back for his answer, he basically told them to go pound sand. He told them that he wasn't going to make things easier for them. In fact, he was going to make them work even harder. Now, we don't know exactly what he said, but it would have been pretty similar to what his friends suggested. Something like, hey, my little finger is thicker than my father's waist. My father laid on you a heavy yoke. I will make it even heavier. My father scourged you with whips. I will scourge you with scorpions. That's kind of messed up. Imagine you were someone who traveled to tell your boss that you and your co-workers were overworked and needed a break. You gave him a few days to think about it. He takes 2 days to think about it, and then he comes back and tells you, you know what? Not only will things stay the same, but I'm going to make your life way harder. In fact, I'm going to double your workload. Yeah, that's right. You heard me. That's kind of how the people must have felt. So these leaders were understandably upset. They couldn't believe that the young, inexperienced king would choose to ignore the wisdom of the elders and destroy any chance of peace. But it wasn't just the leaders who were upset. All 12 tribes of Israel were furious. They were mad that their king didn't care about them or their families. It's hard to imagine that a king could lose his entire kingdom, but that's exactly what Rehoboam did. After Rehoboam insulted the people, 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel declared independence and broke away from him. They said that they had no part in David anymore, meaning they weren't part of his family tree or his kingdom. They appointed Jeroboam, one of the leaders who had spoken on behalf of the other leaders, as the king of the northern tribes. And thus, the United Kingdom of Israel split into 2 separate kingdoms. In the north, there was the Kingdom of Israel, which was composed of 10 of the 12 tribes of Israel, and in the south, there was the Kingdom of Judah, which was composed of the tribes of Judah and Benjamin. Now, if you're familiar with the Bible, you probably already knew this, as most Christians know that both kingdoms play a big role in the Old Testament. The northern kingdom would eventually be taken over by the Assyrians and completely wiped off the map. And the southern kingdom would later be taken over by the Babylonians, although they would later return from exile in Babylon and become the nation of Israel, which still exists today. But when Rehoboam learned that most of his kingdom had broken away from him, he was devastated. I mean, his kingdom was completely destroyed. He didn't know what to do, so he went to the prophet Shemaiah to ask God what to do. And God told him not to fight against his own people, the Israelites. Instead, he told him to go home because this was all God's plan. And so Rehoboam spent the rest of his life ruling over a much smaller kingdom. Although he ruled over fewer people, Rehoboam continued to treat his subjects like they were a burden. And he took all the gold that Solomon had used to make chariots and weapons and used it to make idols and statues of himself. Instead of keeping the kingdom united, he allowed idolatry to spread and weakened his kingdom spiritually. During his 17-year reign, foreign armies attacked Judah and stole from the temple and looted its treasures. In fact, one time some Libyans attacked and stole the gold shields that Solomon had made. These were special shields that were probably over 6 feet tall and made entirely of hammered gold. They were probably used by Solomon's elite guard and were some of the most beautiful pieces of art ever made in Israel. But when Rehoboam came to power, he couldn't afford to maintain the expensive chariots and horses. So he took off the gold shields and turned them into smaller bronze shields. When Rehoboam died, he left behind a legacy of division and decline. Most people remember him as the king who broke Israel into 2 separate kingdoms. And while his father, Solomon, is remembered as one of the greatest kings in Israeli history, Rehoboam is remembered as one of the worst. So what can we learn from his story? First, we can learn that pride and arrogance can lead to destruction. Rehoboam was too proud to listen to the wise counsel of the older men. And he was too arrogant to admit that his father had made mistakes. This caused him to lose most of his kingdom. Second, we can learn that listening to the wrong people can have serious consequences. Rehoboam listened to the advice of his peers, even though they were unqualified to give him such important advice. Third, we can learn that ignoring the needs of others can have devastating effects. Rehoboam chose to ignore the pleas of his people. He could have eased their burden, but he chose not to. And finally, we can learn that sign can have a ripple effect. Rehoboam's decision to turn away from God and allow idolatry to spread caused his kingdom to become weak and vulnerable. Rehoboam's story is a reminder for all of us that leadership is not about power, but about serving others. When we refuse to listen to those we're supposed to be helping, we end up hurting ourselves and everyone around us. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like and share. Subscribe to our channel so you never miss an upload. Check out our new store for merch. Thanks for watching. Until next time.